Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest Chief Value Officer webinar. I might just leave it a couple of moments just whilst we're letting more people come in. But thank you very much for attending, and we hope that this is a really good conversation around leading innovation and steering innovation from a finance perspective in Gen AI and how that will play in. So we'll just give it a couple of more moments while a couple more people come in. And then we'll kick things off. All right. There we are. So given it's now 11:02, we might start. And so just commencing this webinar with an acknowledgement of country. So we begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and pay our respects to elders and past and present. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here today. I'm calling in from Sydney, so the land of the land of Gadigal people in the Eora Nation, and would like to extend that respect. So just a little bit of housekeeping for everyone online. You can submit questions through the questions tab on the right-hand side. If you are experiencing technical difficulties, please click support or visit the website there, so support.goto.com/webinar. After the webinar, you'll be sent an email containing a follow-up of the presentation slides, which we're actually not going to do a huge amount today, a link to the recording, and access to other webinars in this series around the Chief Value Officer series. We're also going to include some of the speaker contact details so that we can go forward from there. Now, jumping straight in, who are your presenters today? Who are the panelists? So we're very lucky today to be joined by Professor Paul Andon, so Professor and Head of School Accounting and Audit and Taxation at the University of New South Wales. Paul is currently reimagining how accounting is taught at University of New South Wales and across Australia. It's really, really exciting what he's doing. Joining us as well is, for him, one of our partners in data and AI. He's situated in Brisbane, but was also a professor of practice at University of New South Wales and works really closely with Paul. And then also, obviously, myself, Nick Fox, partner here, CFO advisory in Sydney with BDO. Now, straight away, I'm going to stop presenting my screen and jump straight into a poll. So we're going to have a couple of polls today, but effectively this one is one to test that everyone's got the technology working, but then two, also what we want to do is understand everyone's experience with AI. So I'm going to launch that poll. And if we start voting on basically your experience with AI, we've implemented AI and use it regularly. We've implemented AI and have a good knowledge. We're reviewing AI. We have not started using AI and have no experience. So we should be able to vote on those on that, and we'll get that baseline. But Paul and Fahim, do you have anything to add to this question or thinking about, where we're going?
No, I think it would be really good if the more people answer this one, we can adjust our presentation and discussion around it as well. So we're really looking forward to this response, actually. I will say, if you're on that very advanced end, apologies in advance, because there might be some elements of this that might be a little boring as well if you're at the very advanced end, but hopefully there's still some value in it for you when we discuss the application of AI as well, and there may be some use cases that are of interest.
And I think just to add to that, I think it's okay to say if you haven't started using AI or we're reviewing AI. I think what we're seeing now is that there's a wide, diverse range, not just across organizations, but also even within organizations as to people's levels of comfort and appetite for AI based on their level of understanding of it and whether they think it's a great opportunity or they're fearful of it or other things. So we really are interested to hear exactly where you are at the moment and don't feel like you need to express a level of expectation bias about what we want to hear back from you.
Great, thank you. Well, we've got about 80% of attendees have responded, so I'm going to close the poll and share the results. So we're sitting at that sort of 46% have not started using AI, 31% are reviewing AI, 11% none, and then a minority are sitting in that implemented AI and use it regularly or have a good knowledge. So we're definitely in that sort of understanding side of things. So I suppose that jumps to the first question to both of you in terms of what is AI?
It depends who you ask, really. But in short, it's the use of machines or computers to do things that we previously would assume humans would be able to do. And if you go down a bit later, it's essentially taking advanced maths and statistics and computer science to bring it all together to analyze lots of information and patterns in those informations and producing results. And ideally, in spades and volumes that the human mind couldn't comprehend. So one of the most complex things we do is probably driving. And if you think about the amount of information we take in while driving, now imagine that exponentially increase like 15 or 20 times. Our minds just simply can't fathom it. And AI would be the use of algorithms and computer programming and mathematics to help us meander through and navigate through all of that complexity and look for insights and patterns that we can make decisions on.
That's really good. And
It
that's, sorry?
Sorry, I was just going to say, Nick, the one thing I will say though is with the advent of ChatGPT, which came out in December 2022, now whenever someone's talking about AI, they're essentially interchangeably referring to ChatGPT. That's all they're referring to more often than not. There are other kinds of AI. There's mathematical pattern recognition and predictive modeling and all of those neural network type things. But you can almost bet your bottom dollar when the average person you're talking to today is mentioning AI, they're essentially referring to this concept called generative AI. Specifically, they're probably referring to a large language model like ChatGPT. And generative AI, in a very small nutshell, is when you give something some information and it generates an answer back to you based on what you've given it. So most of our conversation today is probably going to go along the lines of generative AI and ChatGPT and large language models.
Yeah, because I also understand, I mean, when I've been talking to people about AI, from a baseline perspective, it's actually been around for quite a while, and we've got robotic process automation, etc. There's a number of other elements, but you're right. I mean, there's a lot of people, I imagine, who see ChatGPT and they go, that's AI. So that's a really good segue. Oh, sorry, you were. Oh, no, sorry. That's a good segue into the next question we had, which was, I've seen a lot of hype around AI. So as you've seen, ChatGPT came out. I think I saw the other day that OpenAI wants to raise $7 trillion, which someone told me is actually more of a marketing ploy than actually they're going to get $7 trillion in their bank account. Is this another crypto, NFT, blockchain? You know, we can throw out all the hype words that have come through in the last little while. You know, why might this be different? And what are some of the uses of AI to highlight this difference?
So I think in terms of what's different, this is an intellectual tool in many respects, whereas crypto, NFT, blockchain, they're investment-oriented pieces of technology, or in the case of blockchain, it's a sort of a management tool for transferring information and registering the credibility of the information that's secured in the blockchain. So that's one difference to me, that generative AI, and we're talking mostly about things like ChatGPT, they're intellectual tools. The other main difference is the accessibility and the level of democratization of this technology. You know, to be able to invest in an NFT or invest in crypto, or for an organization to engage with some sort of blockchain, there's significant investment required. either in terms of the knowledge of the technology or in terms of actually implementing it. Whereas with ChatGPT, anyone, or generative AI, anyone can access it. Anyone can use it. It's super simple. It's just basically like talking to, and I'm borrowing your terms here, Fahim, talking to a smart friend. So to me, they're the main differences. The intellectual component of it, it's very much an intellectual technology. The investment that's required. I mean, you can spend money on AI to improve the level of the tool that you use, or to gain security around what you input into it. So that the level of investment required, and also the accessibility.
Yeah, I think that accessibility element makes it a big difference. But don't get me wrong, I'm not here to tell you there's no hype around AI. There's a lot of hype around AI, and you need hype to generate money. Like you just said, probably not 7 trillion, but even any investment you need in AI, you need the hype and you need people excited. But we've already seen evidence of its power. And even if it doesn't improve from what we have right now, it's already been a monumental shift. I use it literally as second nature now. So if I'm planning for a meeting, I prepare, like I'm about to meet Nick Fox from BDO. What are the 3 things that he might be interested in at the moment? And it gets my brain thinking. Like, so even those little use cases, Paul and I almost inevitably, by the 4th email we send each other, one of us has jumped onto ChatGPT to test some idea out. So it's already, that's where it's different. Like, it's already made the shift. And obviously there's some promises it's making, which I don't know if it'll achieve, but if it does achieve them fully, and even if it doesn't achieve them fully, but if it gets anywhere near the promise, I think we're in for some enormous change for all of us. MIT did a study on it already, so there's one credible study on it already, and there's probably more, but I looked at one about 6 months ago. They found that they ran 2 groups. One group used generative AI and one group didn't, and they just compared results and things. And I'm talking in a corporate setting, I'm not talking physical labor. And they found about a 40% time saving for the group that did use generative AI, and about a 20% improvement in the quality of the output as well. So we're not talking about absolving all your responsibilities and handing it all over to AI, but using it as a tool to support what you do. There's already evidence that it's going to make a massive difference.
I think there's a good question I've just seen flow through, which is basically, how do you sense check, validate the output of AI tools for company use? And then I think you've sort of started talking about it.
It is the #1 risk at the moment. I think when it first came out last year in 2023, everyone talked about privacy and security as the biggest risk of generative AI. I think we've sort of stepped forward from that now, and there's solutions out there to have your own secure instance and all of that. So there are ways to manage that, and I think we've kind of moved beyond that shock. But now the biggest risk, I think, is validation risk. Okay, so how do you validate the answer? And my suggestion, and Paul, you can please add on to this, is take a risk-based approach. Like even now, the stuff Paul, you and I are talking about, Nick, I'm hoping the audience is kind of validating what they're hearing, and they're not taking it as gospel. They're not going to go make a significant investment decision off the back of what we say today. But at the same time, from an education and learning tool, from a risk perspective, if there's no harm in listening to us, that we'll use it. So use some discretion in terms of where you're using it. And the moment there's risk associated with relying on the information, figure out alternative ways to validate it. So it's usually one Google search away from validation more often than not, right? Like, okay, you could validate it pretty quickly. There are other ways to validate it as well, is to sense check it with your own experience, which is the one I think most of us are doing. We're going, oh, no, that doesn't sound right. So I know what I'm talking about on that topic. That doesn't sound right. That's one way. You can get the generative AI itself to kind of cross-check answers and look at it from different angles and things like that. I strongly recommend not to use it for matters of fact and use it for matters of logic while it's being worked out. So it's about getting into the thinking as opposed to, the best example I can give you, my brother was looking for a school for my niece. And he went onto ChatGPT and he said, what are the 10 best schools in Brisbane? And it gave a rubbish answer. And I said, yeah, no, that's not the intent of generative AI. what you should be asking generative AI is, I'm thinking of putting my daughter to a school. What are the attributes of a good school that I should be looking out for? And it'll teach you that bit. And that's the nuance. Like, I don't think we're quite there with factual accuracy. It's getting better and better every day. But the logic stuff, wow, it's exponentially, it improves your thinking. It makes you think about the pros and cons of sending a school and all that sort of stuff. It's fascinating. Paul, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, look, I'd only echo those sentiments. I think when we see a new piece of technology, our immediate thought is, how can it give us better answers? But I think actually what ChatGPT does is it helps you to generate in your mind better questions to ask. So in terms of the initial prompt you might put into ChatGPT, so when you're doing a task, you might be a bit stuck in terms of what you're going to write or how you're going to write it up. But then you actually got to think about, well, if I want the AI to help me start off, and Fahim, you and I have talked about how AI may provide the promise of never having to write a first draft of anything ever again, but it is the first draft. And so you need to think about, well, how am I going to formulate the ask of the technology? And that sort of starts your thinking process going already. And then what you get back should prompt further curiosity, which either you might go back to the AI, and again, you shouldn't think about interacting with AI as a one shot. You should be talking to the AI as if you're talking to, and again, I use your terminology, Fahim, a smart friend. So when you're talking to a colleague, when you're talking to people in the workplace or in other settings, and you're trying to think things through, you don't just expect the final answer right off the bat. You talk through things with somebody, you ask further questions, you'll look up other things. As Fahim said, you'll Google things. You'll use your own experience and intuition as to whether it smells and sounds right, and then you'll keep investigating until you feel comfortable and happy with where you've landed. So think of it more as a journey and a process when you're trying to work with something on ChatGPT, rather than I put in a prompt, I get an answer, and then I can go.
Yeah. I don't think it can ever get to a point where we absolve executive accountability or our personal accountability of the answer. I don't think we have the social license yet, and nor is the technology good enough yet for you to blame the AI for a wrong answer, right? Like you are still accountable for any answer it generates. And I've seen some really scary examples of that. Like I've seen one example where they basically fed in contracts into the AI and said to the AI, oh, can you pull out all my obligations from that contract? Now, if you read the disclaimer that comes with the AI, it doesn't take any liability whatsoever of missing one of the key obligations for you. So for something like that, I would hope that people are using a risk-based approach and going, you know what, this might be a time saver, and I'm still going to read the contract. And this might be one of the ways I start, but I'm not ever going to go and say, you know what, the only way I got my obligations was from AI only, because the disclaimer and the terms and conditions of using these products, you're not protected in that sense. So it's really, really important. IBM had a saying apparently in the 70s or maybe even earlier. It said, a machine cannot make a decision, so therefore a machine should never be held responsible for the decision. And I think as long as we remember that, that's going to be really, really important.
But Fahim and Nick, just a question to follow up on that. That's probably the way we all work anyway, without technology. So if we've got teams we're working with and we've got more junior staff on a team, you're doing the same sorts of things, right? So really what we're talking about here is not much different, but we're just adding another member to the team. Does that sound right to you, Fahim and Nick?
That resonates with me. And I think, drawing back to sort of this audience in particular from a finance perspective, imagine going to an auditor and saying, well, I got my policy for leasing from ChatGPT, and that's what we're applying. You're gonna have a qualified opinion immediately. Like unless you're actually saying, okay, well, write me the policy, our leasing, based on the leasing standard. No one is going to take that immediately and not verify it, because it's going into your financial statements. It's no CFO is going to stand on that or should stand on that. I'd be very worried about the CFO who does.
Yeah, so, the future though, The future though, Nick, I reckon there will be AI companies that will give some sort of accountable assurance that that is a valid, compliant lease policy from the relevant accounting standards. And at that point, that verification and validation, it'll cost money, don't get me wrong, but you'll have got that. I also think there'll be a service offering of sorts coming out from professional services firms of AI assurance, like again, a layer of validation. So they'll go, I've used AI to come up with this policy, and then hand it over to Fahim and say, hey, Fahim, can you please read that and sign off, take the risk that now you've created a valid AI policy. So that risk has to move around somewhere and somehow. Everyone's kind of working on that. For me, that's the #1 risk at the moment. For 2024, validation risk of AI results is probably my #1 risk.
Yeah. And I think to Paul's point before, it's the same risk that say BDO accepts when we're providing an opinion on IFRS, for instance.
Yeah.
So if we're saying that this is how your leasing standard should be applied, we are effectively taking the same risk. Now, if our leasing standard started with a question to ChatGPT, it still needs to go through a partner review, etc., and be reviewed to make sure it's not just throwing up garbage.
Yeah, and that's probably, in many ways, that's a credit to how amazing ChatGPT has been. The fact that the result is so good and so close that we're even thinking about that possibility, that we're susceptible potentially to just taking it at face value, is a reflection of just how good a product this thing is, right? And I don't want to just keep talking about ChatGPT because that's just one product, like smartphone and iPhone. There are other forms of this, like Google has a product called Gemini, Amazon has a product called Claude, Facebook has a product, or Meta has a product called Llama, and then there's a whole bunch of open source one. ChatGPT were first movers, so they've kind of just dominated the market now, and we just get a lot of people talking about. I'm using it interchangeably, but just for full disclosure, none of us have any shares in any of those products or anything like that. We're not promoting any one product. But yeah, like it just does reflect though, just how much of a human feat it is that we've now got something so good that people may, the risk is we may just accept it as correct. So we just have to remind ourselves that, you know what, you still have to validate it.
Yeah. This is a good opportunity to probably jump into the next poll, which is effectively saying, do you see finance function leading or being part of the innovation agenda? I see this to be a really important question because a lot of the time I find that finance teams aren't seen as the innovative area. And for him and I have talked about this in terms of we find that sometimes finance teams aren't allowed to fail, or they're not allowed to be given that license to actually try new things. What do you guys think from this perspective?
Paul, do you want to start off?
Yeah, sure. And look, I think this is something which feeds very nicely into the overall broad theme of this series, which is the Chief Value Officer, but also what we're trying to do with our curriculum at UNSW. And a lot of this falls back to almost the basics of what we define accounting to be, or what we let others define accounting to be for us. You know, you Google, and we're talking about, you know, facts are only a Google search away, but Google doesn't always give you a fair reflection on things like what accounting can potentially do for an organization. So, you know, you Google what accounting is, and it talks about, you know, accurate recording of economic transactions, and, you know, basically all the stuff that relates very closely to the bookkeeping aspect of accounting. But, you know, in this Chief Value Officer series, I imagine, and also in other forums, we talk very much about the value-adding potential of finance professionals. And to us at UNSW, what that means is that accountants have the expertise to help organizations understand and run their businesses successfully. So if I just break that down very quickly, you know, understanding a business is understanding all the vital signs of what make a business a success. So whether it's about cash flow or understanding all sorts of other things in the organization, understanding is a key part of being able to be informed, to analyze what's going on in a business, and then to help more effectively run your business. So making key decisions, whether they're strategic decisions, big picture decisions for the organization, whether they're more granular everyday decisions around the business operations, or whether you're making decisions about very commercial things like dropping or keeping product lines, or merging with another organization, or other things. So accounting is super powerful in all aspects of understanding and running an organization. And I don't think we emphasize that enough. And I think that's where it comes back to, can the finance function be a part of innovation and an innovation agenda? I think they're actually a crucial part, and actually can be a leading part of an innovation agenda, because it's the finance function that knows what's happening in a business and can advise on that more than anyone else. And I think that's where there's a great opportunity for AI, because AI and technology takes away a lot of what finance functions are burdened with at the moment, and that is a lot of the routine, the everyday, the transactional. It improves the accuracy of that sort of stuff, it improves the efficiency, and it does that free up that time to be able to devote more attention to that value-adding potential.
Yeah,
that's really good, and I totally agree with that, and it looks like the audience also agrees quite a lot in this respect. I'm a big believer in the finance function being integral to the business, and being sort of, it touches all parts of the business, and therefore it should be involved in the innovation agenda. That's a big belief of mine.
Yeah. Can I just jump in there a little bit and say where the opportunity for AI is for that finance function, or people working in that function? And let's go back to the actual people, right? It has the ability to empower you as an accountant, or as a player in the finance team, you've essentially got that smart friend in your pocket now. So I'll give you a practical use case. I've got monthly financial results for the organization, and I'm the finance business partner. I'm about to go meet the head of marketing, and I'm the finance business partner for marketing. I'm going to present these results to them. Can you just coach me with AI? Can you just coach me on what are the 3 or 4 things that the marketing manager or CMO might be interested in from these numbers? How would they be interpreting these numbers? And then I've also got 3 things I want to highlight to them. Can you coach me in how I can get that message across better? So you've got this practice run of, in an embarrassment-free zone with AI, to go, okay, this is how I would look at these numbers if I adopted the role of a marketing officer. And I think that's going to be a game, because I think suddenly the effectiveness of finance business partnering, but in both directions, is going to be such value add. Okay, and I think there's a great opportunity for accountants to be seen. And as Paul said, I don't think we're just doing it ourselves. I think it's been defined for us. I'm an accountant as well, right? It's almost been defined for us. People have a perception when you say the word accountant, you go to Google image search and you type in accountant, the pictures you get are a certain type, right? And as a result of that, we actually miss out on all the value-adding features that we all do, particularly in management accounting. And the importance of that element, the idea, the understanding of cost drivers, the adopting an approach of enabling people to make decisions and things like that. And I think AI will give us a great opportunity to fulfill that role really, really well, and play with that. And it'll also increase, hopefully, the business's understanding of the role of the finance function as well, because they too will have an AI. So if I'm the head of marketing again, and I have a meeting with my finance business partner next week or in a couple of hours, I can go on AI first and say, hey, the finance business partner is going to come in, teach me on the 3 questions I should be asking. So you've got this middle mediator between the finance function and everyone else, and which will be really, really cool. And the final thing I'll just say is, one of the things we need to see happening, and I hope it happens, is the finance function has 2 roles in terms of AI. One is, how can we use AI within our own function? And what can we do to improve our function? But then the other one is, how do we enable the use of AI from a financial and funding perspective and cost drivers and efficiency perspective for everyone else? And I think the finance function, it's really, really important that the CFO, as a chief value officer, doesn't think that AI is the domain of the IT department or the CIO or someone like that to roll out. They're actually actively involved to make sure that the benefits, like I mentioned, 40% benefit, the CFO has to be involved in one, realizing that benefit, but then also redeploying that benefit somehow, right? I think Nick, you and I talked about there's no point getting a 0.2 FTE, or no one wants to cut staff or anything like that. But they do want to realize the benefit and make use of that benefit really well. And I think, again, this finance function has a big role in that space.
And if I could just reiterate, Fahim provided a number of good points there, I think. But one thing I'd just like to reiterate is that idea that the AI can provide so much more than just savings of time. I think that's where in other forums I see the conversation stuck. What efficiencies will this allow us to achieve? How will this allow us to automate things? How will I save time? And that is absolutely an important element of what this new wave of technology can bring. But it can also bring so much more. And to give you another example of where we're going to try and use it in one of our courses, so we have a course called Fraud Examination Fundamentals. And an important part of the fraud discovery and investigation process is the fraud interview. Interviewing someone who potentially may have, who may be suspicious about it in terms of engaging with nefarious activity in an organization. Now, that's very hard to help students to understand and learn. But what AI can do is we can set up a role play. So we can put in a few simple prompts, say, hey, we want to do this particular assignment with students. We want you to play the role of a suspect in a fraud investigation. The person will type in a number of questions and we want you to provide a response accordingly. So the student gets the real experience of actually interviewing someone without, the challenges of actually trying to simulate that in another way. Now, in the past, we may have tried to set up a program to do that, and that would have been quite time and resource intensive to create, and you need the technical skill to do that. Now you don't need anything other than to prompt in the right questions. And it may take a little bit of time to find the right prompt and get the AI to do exactly what it is what you want to do. It may go a little bit off piste from time to time, but it will still allow the student to go through the process, and then they can go back and reflect on that exercise and think about, okay, well, what did I do right there? What did I do wrong? Should I frame that question a little bit differently to get the answer that I was looking for, etc. So there are these use cases coming out now that show that the AI has so much more potential than just the time-saving aspect.
That's really useful because, as Fahim mentioned, I've talked to a number of CFOs, and as I think he has as well. A lot of people don't say to me, I want to save 0.7 in an FTE because, one, I can't actually realize that saving. It's not a real saving. I also have come across a lot of people recently that, we're not actually interested in cutting heads. It's about how do we make people more efficient. And I'm a big fan of saying, at a very base level, if you've got a really manual process, for instance, in your accounts payable department, there is not a single person on this planet who is jumping out of bed excited in the morning to manually enter invoices into a system. And I've heard someone argue that, oh, well, that's actually a control because that person's looking at every invoice. I would argue the opposite, that that's not a control because that person is not looking at any of those invoices that they're manually entering into this system. So what would be more valuable for that person is actually having some technology that's scanning invoices as they're coming in, automatically loading them into the system and checking exceptions on the way through. So I think that's much more valuable. And then what we can start doing with those invoices is checking those exceptions. For one, that's your control. But then two, they're also starting to see where the patterns are emerging, what the opportunities are, etc. So that's a really important piece, I think. And to your point, I think there's a big overarching element here that it's how do we actually enhance finance functions? How do we actually get more out of them in a much more value-add manner? Another element that I always talk about is I think everyone has probably been in this position where they're presenting a paper or information to a board or senior executive, and they get asked a curly question that should I know the answer to, and you kind of have two choices in that matter. One, the proper answer is I'll take that on notice if I don't know the answer, or maybe I can wing it. Winging it's never a good idea, so take that on notice. And on poem reflection, maybe I don't look that good if I'm taking it on notice, because maybe I should know that. But to Fahim's point, maybe before the meeting I could have asked ChatGPT or Copilot or one of the others, what are the questions the board might ask me about this paper? And it's not going to give me a comprehensive list, but I might go, oh, wait a minute, that's a really good one. And I should have an answer prepared for that. It's not going to be 100%, I don't think, but it's going to give me much more in-depth analysis. And I think that's something that would resonate with a lot of people on this call, because I think both of you have probably been in that situation. I imagine most people on this call have been in that situation.
You've touched on my favorite use of generative AI at the moment, which is I love asking generative AI, say I've got an idea, I want to do something, and I'll put it in and I'll say, hey, what are the pros and cons of doing this? And because I've already started with the front of I'm going to do it, I'm biased. I can only think of the pros. I can't think of the cons of doing it. So the fact that I've now got a really advanced AI-driven model that can go through my idea and give me, hey, Fahim, watch out for X, Y, Z with your idea. Now, if I ask it for 5 disadvantages of doing my idea, 2 of them might be useless, but the other 3 make me think almost all the time, right? And that in itself is an eye-opener, and it just produces a much better product almost every single time.
And I did almost that exact same thing yesterday. So in a sort of slightly unrelated matter, I've been running some focus groups to think about a new program in sustainability in our school. And one of the things I wanted to do with the focus group was ask them what sort of skills and knowledge should we be including in this specialization or in this program. And I wanted to test it out, like what would I get back before I got to the meeting, just to sort of get a sense of what sort of things might come back to me. Now, what ended up coming back was a range of soft skills. And that was great, like from the AI, that was great, but that wasn't what I was asking for. So it made me think, okay, well, they might be the sorts of things that come back to me in a conversation. So that made me reframe my question to the focus group before I got there. And it was, okay, I understand and I know, and we certainly will be looking at soft and transferable skills as part of this program. But I want you to think about 2 things. One, what are the subject matter skills that we need to develop in a program on sustainability? But 2, if there are transferable skills that you think are particularly important to this particular program, as opposed to transferable soft skills that would be relevant to all business school students. So I think that's another example of Fahim's point of you can use it to sharpen your thinking, to prepare for a conversation by simulating that conversation in advance and see what you get back. So you could interpret that as, oh, the AI just gave me a bad answer, but actually you should reflect it back on yourself and think about, was I asking the right question, or did I frame it in a way that, like the AI, people that you talk to might interpret it in a way which is different to what you have in your mind, because you've already preconceived what the answer is that you want to have come back.
I think that's a really good comment, and it's a nice segue for me, because I'll talk about one of our next webinars, and the Chief Value Officer is actually going to be about communication, about how do we add value through communication. Now, Gen AI is going to help us communicate, but once I can see this working really well, because someone once told me, and I thought this was really a good comment, that I'm responsible not only for message sent, but message received. So the amount of people who tell me, oh, I sent the email, or I sent this, or I sent the instructions, but has that person actually received the instruction or the email in the manner that we wanted it to? And this is actually quite a good use case, I'm now thinking, and sorry, this is a bit off the wall, but I'm testing with ChatGPT or Gen AI, how will this be received?
And you can be even more specific. You can say, I'm going to send this to the head of HR, or I'm going to send this to the head of marketing, or I'm going to send this to the head of operations in a large company. And ChatGPT is smart enough to adopt that role and tell you how they receive it as that person, which is phenomenal in terms of what a learning opportunity we have here.
Yeah. And I can even see the I'm about to send this email off and I expect a response. Do you think the person will respond? Because we've all done that as well. I've sent off requests or what I think is a request, but you think it's just me telling you something that's mildly interesting, but I'm not going to respond because you haven't actually asked me anything directly.
That's a really good use case.
Yeah. I've got another poll here, which is basically, as a finance professional, do you see your role as being innovative? Which I think, this cuts to the core of what we're actually talking about here. So before we talked about whether or not we see the finance function as being innovative or whether it's actually there, but also now it's granular. Is your role actually about being innovative, or is it more about being functional, I suppose?
Yeah. And we're taking a bet, the work that we're doing with UNSW and Paul, we're taking a bet that the students of the future from accounting will have to be innovative and decision makers and things like that. So that's the changes we're making to the curriculum to enable a bit more of the innovation and thinking and things like that as well.
And I think the future of finance has to go that way, because if we live up to the stereotype of being mostly focused on transactional issues and bookkeeping, the technology will take over. It's and for the better. So you'll get greater accuracy, more efficient. And as you said before, Nick, we've had RPA for a number of years. I think artificial intelligence will just amplify and elevate the contribution that sort of technology can provide. So it's really the human side of accounting work that's going to become more and more important over time. The value add that finance functions that can offer to their organizations and, in terms of firms to their clients. So I think that in a sense, and that's why we are thinking about how this will cascade down into our curriculum, is because I think that's the future of finance.
I think that's really important. Sorry to jump in there, but I think we talked about RPA. Some of the comments I've seen around RPA, for instance, or just automation in particular, is the fact that ultimately we still need a human to start designing the actual process. Because if I automate a poor process, all we're going to do is that poor process faster. Yeah. And I think where you're going with this is enabling the students of the future to actually be those innovators and understand how it actually operates. But we still need people to be making calls in certain respects.
Absolutely, and I think. Yeah. So I was going to say, and I think there will always be always be a place for technical expertise. So the things that we tend to automate, as you say, someone needs to design the system and provide that expert advice into the system for it to be able to work effectively and do the right thing. But I think what will become more mainstream in the profession is the more value-adding and advisory aspect of a finance professional's work.
Yeah,
I agree.
If we believe the hype, Nick, and I'll wait for the poll to get off the screen, but
there we go. Sorry,
if we believe the hype of AI, there is a future where even the AI does tell you what processes to automate. Okay, so if we then step back then and we just think about it, so I studied in a developing country. So I was born in Bangladesh and then I studied in South Africa before I came to Australia, right? And in developing countries, because of affordability, the way you teach in schools is you just teach the knowledge. So you send out textbooks to the small village, especially in my little village that I grew up in. People just the government just sends out textbooks to the school and we just essentially rote learn the textbook. We don't have time to do science experiments with Bunsen burners and things, which is like mainstream in Australia, but in a developing country that doesn't happen. So we've got this concept of knowledge only, right? And you come to Australia, and I really struggled because my brain wasn't wired that way and I hadn't had that level of education. Australia was all about applying that knowledge. So what you get taught in school was application of that knowledge, not just what's in the textbook, but how to apply it. I think AI is now jumping into that application space. It's teaching us. So Google was the knowledge space. We now don't know anything about the Roman Empire anymore. It's not impressive if you can tell me about the Roman Empire. I can just Google that. So Google took over the knowledge space a fair bit. The application space is where we are at as a society at the moment. I think as professionals, finance professionals and things, our ability to take finance knowledge from a textbook and apply it to a business is what we are valued for. I think AI is going to either support that, and if you believe the hype, it's even going to take quite a predominant role in the application of the knowledge bit. But what it won't be able to do is the delivery, okay, which is the next layer. So an AI can always tell you how to cook the best piece of chicken, but ultimately you still have to cook the chicken. Like, you have to do the actual doing, okay? And in an organizational setting, I think that customer service delivery, the partnering, the collaboration and execution, I think that's where we're going to have to play a much, much bigger role. We still have to have the knowledge, we still have to understand the application and all of that, but that's not the only thing we're going to be valued for anymore. Whereas right now, if you're pretty smart and you know stuff that other people don't, you're valued. But even if you're a bad person, I think in the future, if you're a bad person, no matter how smart you are, you're at risk. So I think our ability to interact with each other, deliver, and get a team working together as a group and deliver something, I think that's where the future is going to lie.
No, that's really useful. And I think from this perspective, I've got a couple of good questions here that have popped up, so I might circle into those. But we've got a really two themes have come through, and I think this one sort of wraps it up, which is we're considering using Copilot due to the security and data concerns instead of ChatGPT. I'm interested in your take on this. And there was another question that talked about security and data concerns as well. So yeah. I think, yeah, there is some concern around that.
Yeah, I kind of touched on that. It was when ChatGPT first came out, that was the #1 risk that everyone was going on about, right? And I kind of brushed it off a little bit and said that it's now been resolved, and I'll just explain it very quickly. So the risk that we're talking about is if you go on openai.com or any app, any AI app, if you install an app to listen into your meetings and write notes for you, whatever AI app you use, at least the employees of that app company can see all of your information. So for most of us, that would be a breach of privacy in some way, shape, or form, because we are releasing it to external parties, third parties. Yes, it's not gone public, but there are 900 employees at OpenAI who can now read what I'm putting in to openai.com. Copilot, depending on which version you're talking about, like if you, whatever they called Bing Chat before, they've also renamed Copilot just to confuse us all. Same issue. If you go on Bing Chat and the old Bing Chat, it's the same challenge, right? People at Microsoft can see what you're reading. Now, there's obviously buttons that say it's encrypted and things like that, but odds are you will be in breach of your company's data governance, data sovereignty, IT privacy policies. You'll be in breach in some way, shape, or form. The data sovereignty one is even a little bit more scary because most of the processing power is in America. So as an Australian company putting data into an OpenAI platform, that data is going to America, and America has the Patriot Act, which most companies would cause lots of governance issues. They have resolved that now. So since August and then November last year, you can now buy your own Australian instance of a secure environment where you can plug in either ChatGPT, so OpenAI, so Microsoft has made a big investment in OpenAI, so you can get your own in-house version of ChatGPT in your own tenancy, which will be just as secure as your emails. Okay, so no less, no more, because it'll be in your own Azure tenancy. Copilot, the product version, which is this thing that's going to be embedded into your Microsoft Office 365 suite, so your PowerPoint, Word, Excel files, and things like that, and it'll point to SharePoint. Again, since November 1 last year, Microsoft has released it in the Australian market that we can now get our own private instance that won't go to America, that'll be in your tenancy, it'll be secure and things like that. So there are ways to deal with the security now, it just costs money. So just, but to give people a sense of money as well, and apologies if there's anyone from Microsoft on the call, but my understanding is it's around $50 a month per user is sort of the ballpark figure, plus or minus $20. I don't know the exact number, but around $50 a month per user is sort of the pricing we're talking about. If you want your own version of OpenAI or ChatGPT, it's about $50,000 to $100,000 to set it up. Okay, so we're not talking millions, and if you think about the potential of the things we're talking about, the pricing is actually not horrible. It's not prohibitive for many companies. It's about a $50,000 configuration fee, and then there's a per use fee. So you can either get a license fee per user if people are using it. I think they're talking about $30 per user per month. You can buy it directly from them as well, about a $30 per month per user. My preferred model is the per use case. So I think it's about 3 or 4 cents per page. So remember the printing costs that have now disappeared off our financial statements. I think the printing costs are going to come back in digital form now, where we're going to pay per page of use. So that's kind of how you deal with the privacy issues now. And short of doing that, if you don't have a private environment, we're doing it through education. So we're educating all our staff and saying, or everyone should educate all their staff, say, hey, you wouldn't email this out to anyone? Of course not. Cool. Then don't put it in ChatGPT either. Like, it's as simple as that. And hopefully people will remember that and we'll go through that.
Yeah, and I think, the education piece is really important. We can sit in front of our screen in the privacy of our room or our own home and think it's all closed and anonymous, but in fact it's anything but. So like Fahim said, if you're not going to put something in an email, so in our sort of world, we wouldn't put student data, we wouldn't put anything which identifies an individual, anything that's about a confidential matter, about someone's enrollment, those sorts of things you would never put into ChatGPT because you would never disclose it anywhere else that would enter into a public domain. So that's something that we really need to build awareness of, that even though it has that false sense of security because you are just sitting in front of your computer and no one else is physically there, that doesn't mean that at the other end of the system that there are other people involved.
Yeah, and can I just say, given we've got CFOs in the room, please weigh up the opportunity cost of saying no to this investment, because the upside potential is quite high. And yes, hard credential, you may have saved $100,000 by not investing, but we haven't quantified the benefits you've just missed out on by not doing it. And as an organization, I think we all have to go on this journey. If our competitors are doing it and they're achieving efficiencies and things, it'll make us less competitive. So we are in that space, and this is a great audience for that, to start thinking about what is a tolerable level of investment, and then what's the journey of that investment going forward, that we can make sure we're getting the gains that we need. When I presented to our CEO, our national CEO at BDO, Tony Schiffman, I told him the MIT study reckons it's about a 40% gain in efficiency. He's like, for him, if I get a quarter of that, I'm in. Okay, like, okay, I'm approving this, even if I get a quarter. So just work out the payoff pretty quickly, and I think there's a huge uplift here that we need to watch out for, and make sure that we don't just see the one side of the equation.
Yeah. I'm going to launch into just the final question, which is actually, I think, really good here in terms of, do you see AI taking jobs away from accountants? Now, I think, Paul, this is going to go to your strengths and what you're doing at the University of New South Wales, well, what both of you guys are doing at the University of New South Wales, and how you're actually future-proofing students coming through.
Yep. So my answer to this would be probably in line with what I've said before. I don't see it as taking away jobs, but what I do think we have is some work to do around educating our students to be prepared for an AI future, and talking about how accounting is a significantly value-adding discipline is where we need to start, and help students understand how accounting helps you to understand and run a successful business. The other thing is we need to work on what people outside our disciplinary domain think about accounting. so they appreciate the value of what it is that accountants can contribute to. So those decision makers can give us the space to do all the advisory, value adding, informing and influencing of decisions type work that we can actually do as a, sometimes the notion of a finance business partner, that tag tends to get a bit of a bad rap. But if we truly live up to that name, we should be very much a partner in key business decisions, key business outcomes, understanding what's going on in the business. And so the efficiencies that AI will potentially provide will be more than taken up by much more value-adding work, in my view.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting future in that space. I think it'll definitely take some roles away. There's no doubt about that, but so will any advancement in any technology. I think it'll force us to adapt and align on our strengths. And I think that's what Paul and I were kind of discovering when we were beginning this journey at UNSW to change the curriculum. We actually don't have to do anything new. Accounting, if you take its broadest definition and all the skills you learn in accounting, we just got to focus on the ones that aren't like manual tasks or record keeping or bookkeeping or anything like that. We've got to focus on that true business partnership and guidance and delivery and support and enablement. And I think that's where, if anything, my view is that accounting will become one of those projects in the future where, or professions in the future where we actually have an opportunity to increase our impact, not decrease it, in my view. And I'm obviously quite biased and optimistic about that. But yeah, I absolutely think this is the time to speak up more. It really pains me when I hear other people stand up. I see articles, I hear other people stand up on stage and say, oh, we won't need accountants in the future. Yes, we won't need a particular parts of the tasks that accountants do in the future, but the person who's saying that definitely doesn't understand what an accountant is in full.
Yeah, I agree with those sentiments, and I think we've got interesting results here. I wonder if I took away the maybe and forced people into the yes or no camps, what the results would be.
And I think the maybe answer is okay. Like, I think we're still learning how this is going to impact the work that we do. So I think that answers more a let's wait and see what it does. And I think what will end up playing out in relation to that space that we're not quite sure about is the sort of thing that Fahim was saying, that certain responsibilities will fade away, but new responsibilities or certain responsibilities will be amplified, and it will come back to much more of that value-adding aspect to what we do, which will be amplified, and the transactional, the everyday, the bookkeeping element will probably phase out to a large degree. I think the thing that most people focus on is the bookkeeping aspect and think, well, if there's going to be no bookkeeping, we don't need any more accountants. Well, there's a whole lot more work to do in the accounting space, and you still do need those technical experts to help set up the systems, as you were saying, Nick. But I think it's interesting times and exciting times, and it'll be interesting to see how things play out. And I think we should be proactive in helping to shape that future and not let circumstances impose things or impose changes on us based on what people think accounting is rather than what it can actually offer.
You've reminded me of an example. There's a phrase that said, we don't know what the future will hold, but the best thing we can do is prepare for it.
Yep.
And I think that's a really good way to think about it, especially in this banner of Chief Value Officer. I think us preparing will give us the best opportunity to add value later.
Absolutely.
I'm just aware of time. I feel like we could keep going, but we are almost at time, and we've been inundated with questions. So thank you to everyone who's asked questions. We will actually try and answer you directly as well. We'll go through that process. I wanted to leave you with something that I read recently in a book, that we're nowadays talking about, particularly RPA, etc., in the same way that male accountants back in 1900 were talking about women accountants, in terms of they can take away processing and the menial tasks. So more of a thought to think about in the future. But I thought that was a really interesting sort of comment. So watch the future and watch this space. And then the final bit that I wanted to leave on is again, someone once told me, we were talking about e-invoicing and the PEPL framework, etc. And how if we fast forward to say 2030, it will just be what we use for our invoicing in our systems. Again, if we now think about it from that investment point of view that Fahim talked about as a CFO, start thinking about the opportunity cost, because if we fast forward to 2030, for instance, Microsoft Copilot is going to be everywhere. It's going to be part of our normal operations. It's going to be part of what we do. So it's not to say that you necessarily need to go and invest today, but think about the opportunity cost in that.
Yeah. And that's where we've been focusing, Nick. So we've been helping our clients develop their 6 to 12 month plan, and sitting with a group of executives in every organization to talk about the use cases. And I see there's a question on there saying, requesting specific examples. We'll make sure in whatever we hand out, we answer that question. There are some really great examples that I genuinely believe will be game changers. But yeah, what we've been recommending every organization now does, and I really hope CFOs would lead that conversation, is form your 6 to 12 month AI rollout plan, where you discuss, okay, where are we going to use it? What are the rules of the game for us? Who's going to use it? Is everyone going to have access? How much money are we willing to invest in it? Because you do need to start planning now for whatever wave is going to come in 3, 4, 5 years. We've got a little bit of time between now and the really big wave of technology that's going to come our way. And it'll be really good, I think, if organizations could start thinking about how we're going to be ready for that wave when it does come.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We're at time, or a little bit over time, but thank you both, Fahim and Paul, for joining us. I might give a shout out again to the University of New South Wales and what you guys are doing in the accounting course, and maybe Paul, if you wanted to quickly plug what you're doing, and you know, is there a way that CFOs and finance teams can actually support you in this journey as well?
Are you on mute, Paul?
How am I now? Okay. Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Nick, for the opportunity for a quick plug. So look, as I said before, our general agenda is to move the emphasis on what students learn to why they are learning it. And the sort of tagline to help students understand what we mean by that is that we want to teach students that accounting is how you understand a successful business. A key element of achieving that is to get significant industry involvement into our curriculum. So we are looking to partner up various professionals with the courses that we run, and for there to be a partnership between the lecturers involved and relevant industry people in co-designing how the curriculum will be delivered to achieve those outcomes that I mentioned before. So please just drop me an email, perhaps in the feedback you give to participants afterwards. I'm very happy for you to include my email address in that, and people can feel very free to reach out to me and discuss where they feel like they might want to be involved. It could be very basic, like doing a guest lecture. It could be involved in supporting our tutorial process. It could be partnering at a higher level with the design of the course. It could be a whole bunch of things. So yeah, we're very open to hear from people and to see what we can do to work together.
Right. Well, thank you very much. I really do appreciate your time, and thank you very much to everyone. All right.
Thank you.